Alright, and we're rolling again.
Okay, so this is going to be like part 2 of my real beginner equipment 101 fighting class for Amtgard. So for this one, we're going into shields. Strap shields are just about ubiquitous in Amtgard. Pretty much everybody's got one. So it's one of the things that I kind of use as my example on how to kill someone with something is figuring out shots on how to kill strap shields, just because they're so very common. Some regions it's a little bit less common than others, but generally speaking, if you're on a large enough ditch field, you're going to find that most of the people have strap shields, and that's kind of the old-timey standard of Amtgard that will probably continue for a very long time. So the very basics of fighting with a shield is the idea that you have a guard that kind of stays and passively blocks attacks. If my opponent's looking at me without me moving, there's a huge number of shots that my opponent would normally throw in a fight that simply will not hit me because I'm standing here with this piece of equipment in my hand. It's kind of self-explanatory in that way, but the difficulty is that means that the more you move a shield like this, the less useful it is, generally speaking. So I'm going to go through first a couple of common mistakes that I see, because I think that's important to cover. You'll see players walk out and their guard will be tabled up like this. This is a mistake, and this will get you killed, either up like this or out like this. These are things that in other games like the SCA, they have purposes behind not being up and in front. But within the game of Amtgard, you really want to have it flat up against your body with a shield like this. If you have a dome shield, so much the better. But the reason why is, Jake, if you'd be so kind as to table your shield out, is aside from the fact that I have a relatively easy avenue with which to kill my opponent by going around his passive block. He's made his passive block smaller and less useful. To block that and survive, my opponent has to overreact, which allows me very easy access to the entire rest of his body, too. So if I see an opponent who has their shield cocked out to the side like this, my first instinct is going to be to attack this side with a fake and watch them overcommit to that. Go for it, Jake, if you want to throw against me. So they're going to have to move their shield a lot in such a way that if they had a guard there to begin with, would just be blocked. So instead of having to move their shield like this, they can just keep it here, and that's going to do a whole lot of good. Now, having said that, as Jake is goofing off and having fun with all of this, there are advantages to things like bringing the shield out of position to throw specific shots. If you move your shield out of the way of an offensive path, that is not the same as just keeping your shield tabled up or in a position.
This like you said, this is not getting you any passive defense really, other than like the spot right here. So all this down here isn't defended. But this, when you're setting up something else, you can do it, but it's definitely not what you want to enter a fight with your shield like this. You don't want to do that.
Yeah. So I guess since we're doing kind of introductory stuff for equipment, one of the age-old, kind of good first ideas for strap shield is to grab your tunic here. You're going to find different schools of thought on this, but for really new fighters, people who are not familiar with shields, this is probably going to be a good idea, just because it can be very exciting when you're first starting off and someone swings a shot and you're like, yes, okay, I've blocked this, and then you die just right then. So grabbing the tunic means that when my opponent throws that exact same shot, that my shield just kind of stays in place, and I get used to the idea that the shield doesn't have to move to block for me. And the more advanced parts of this are things that I don't do overly well, because I don't use strap shields very often, which is when my opponent attacks a spot that isn't passively blocked, so go ahead and throw a little stank on it. What I need to do is, instead of moving the shield, I need to move my body slightly so that the shield moves in front of that shot without me having to move my shield itself. Me moving my body with my shield attached to my body allows that to happen.
No, you were right. Just bend your knees a bit more.
Okay.
And then it's going to give you more of that lean without having to expose as much.
Okay, yeah. So this is the idea of what I want to be doing to stay alive with a strap shield.
Yep.
Is get into a good fighting crouch, and instead of moving my shield up and in front and opening myself up with every block, it's moving my body slightly so that the shots that otherwise would be landing are not landing. Now, what this means is that your sword is largely freed up to do the killing. Now, one of the difficulties with a strap shield is that it will get in the way of certain shots. So you want to find a shield that gives you good protection without blocking out some of your favorite and most practiced types of motions, your favorite most practiced types of shots. Because you can get a super big shield that protects you really well, but then you can't hit people while using it. Or you can get a small shield that doesn't protect you very well, you can hit people, but you're dead before you get the opportunity to do so. So you really kind of want to, like, I think that's the most important part of finding a shield, is finding one that doesn't, is the right size, doesn't irritate you to use it, is probably the best rule of thumb. And then if it doesn't irritate you, learn to get comfortable with it from there. So I'm not a huge fan of strap shields, but they really are kind of the Amtgard standard. There are a couple of different types of strap shields. This one is kind of a oddly hung center strap.
These are loader shields.
We're just gonna do that.
So they're not great.
We don't worry about that. So
We will
anyway,
say who made them.
but there are such things as
Charles.
low strap shields, where you have a strap here, and the idea is to keep the shield kind of in place here. I am not a fan of low strap shields. Honestly, I haven't seen them very much in quite a long time.
They used to be in vogue, but not really.
Yeah, they used to be in vogue, and the idea was you put your thumb on your belt buckle, and you just never moved out of that position.
Yeah.
And it's a style.
It's not a good one.
It's not a good one. I feel like it's much easier to capitalize on certain
Yeah.
things than a center strap shield is, and doesn't give you as many offensive options. Things like a dark side or right out.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other difficulties with it. But if you are using one and you're comfortable with it, feel free to decide if it's right for you. And if you want to invest, your shield blank that you bought into making a low strap shield, go for it. Maybe you'll teach me something about it one day. But outside of that, find a shield that is the right size for you, that allows you to throw the shots you want to throw. With my body mechanics, this one doesn't get in the way, because as my shoulder moves forward, my shoulder hits maximum extension right as it's touching the outside of the shield. Whereas if it was a little bit bigger, and I was going like this, and my shoulder's way before maximum extension, I'm doing something wrong. It is back. So those are kind of the basics of shield fighting, shield defense, I guess you would say. The idea is that the shield is going to keep you safe. I think that one of the important things is recognizing the fact that you will need your sword to block with occasionally. Kind of the goal is to not need it, but you will come across fighters that if you just block with a shield, they will kill you. So yeah, the two spots you're most commonly going to block are going to be here, or down here, especially against talented Florentine fighters, but there are definitely sword and board fighters who are going to hurt you metaphorically hurt you if you don't block with your sword. Things like a spin shot, very important. They're relatively hard to block with a strap shield while keeping yourself defended in a good position, whereas that person throwing that same shot when I've got the sword here, that allows me to capitalize off of the defense without shifting my shoulder back to block with and foregoing my return shot as they spin out. So there's going to be a world of difference between here and here, right? Even with the exact same shot, you're going to get different results. So those are kind of key things that I would say with just kind of the introduction to the strap shield. Do you want to grab Flo and we'll go through that? And then I'll probably ask you about strap shield, fighting strap shield. I don't even know how to do that.
I mean, honestly, same.
Okay.
It's just mostly bend at the knees and rotate instead of moving your arm around the block.
Okay.
That's all really it boils down to.
So, and for me, this is this is what is kind of considered an older school stance is shield foot forward. I have pretty much never been comfortable with shield foot forward, so I pretty much always put sword foot forward, except when I've got a weird stance going on for a specific reason. So watch for that if you're ever fighting me. My left foot forward means I'm setting something up. We don't know what it is yet because we'll find out.
We don't know.
But against Florentine fighters, right? So the idea is recognizing the Florentine fighter's strengths is the ability to overload your defense. This is where things like blocking with the sword are going to be very important, because if I just try to rotate with the shield and hope, I'm going to get overloaded, I'm going to concentrate too much on defense, and I'm probably going to die pretty quickly. Like we said in the Florentine video, generally speaking, one of the two things you're going to want to do with a strap shield or with a shield is you're going to want to either come out and just swing on the flow fighter right away and trust that their return shots are going to be blocked by your strap shield, unless they're aimed directly at the arm, in which case you've got to figure out something for that. But that you have an offensive advantage in that most of your opponent's swings, unless they're thinking very carefully about them, are going to be blocked, and none of your swings are going to be blocked without your opponent paying careful attention to it. So what you're wanting to do is overload your opponent's ability to think about things. Now, one of my preferred ways of doing this is by throwing something that is offensively potent that starts with a fake. So a lot of times against flow fighters, I'm going to start with a fake stab and then come across. This is a shot that works relatively well against flow fighters, but the fact of the matter is that against flow fighters with a strap shield, you have the advantage that your opponent taking an unthinking swing back is just going to walk into your block, and you don't have to worry about it, hitting you. You can also do things like swing on one side, anticipate the fact that your opponent's going to attack you back, and then start going from there. And as you do that, a lot of times if you shift from one arm to the next, your opponent's going to get locked up into a very unthinking shot with whichever hand you're abandoning, while they try to play defense with this hand. So if I were to say attack Kenshin's left arm, and then he were to try to return back and I was going to go here, he would bring his block up and probably just start throwing chops in at that side, because that's something that he can do without really thinking about it while he tries to survive my sword on this side. This gives me advantages because his unthinking chops on that side, I should be able to position my sword in such a position or my shield in such a position that he can't get through off of repetitive shots unless he thinks about it. And I don't want to give him time to think about it because I'm going to be overloading his defense with my sword on this side. So it allows me to not think about defense at all while making my opponent think about defense with one sword and offense with two swords. And a lot of times they're just going to kind of get overloaded and die in that sort of position. Now, as the flow fighter, the correct thing to do here is to disengage and come at it again. But if I'm going to offensively start off, that's going to be one of my starters, is to try to put him in a position so that I just give him too much to think about, to productively think about everything, and understanding that unproductive thoughts tend to hit the shield. So the other idea behind it is to concentrate on defense. Now, I'm not very good at this one. So what I would be trying to do is letting my opponent come out and extend into a shot that leaves them vulnerable, and if I've picked off both of the blocks, recognize that getting out of that position alive tends to be very, very difficult. I don't rely on my equipment and my defensive skills very well, so I tend to disengage during those sorts of bouts, but it is a valid tactic and one that a lot of top-end strap shield fighters do because they're better at that sort of thing than I am. So, again, the idea, though, is to wait for your opponent to make openings on themselves and then just go from there. And some of the best fighters I've seen do this really just wait until their opponent gives them a shot that they can throw very, very efficiently, where you just kind of block, and then as soon as you can land this shot without getting hit, you just throw this shot without getting hit. Your opponent is a lot of times going to get pretty desperate if they're not landing things with a high degree of success, that they start throwing more and more outlandish things at you, and then as soon as they're throwing outside and you don't have to worry about defense anymore, you just chop on in. So those are the sorts of things I would really heavily suggest with flow fighters, is recognize the fact that they're going to be trying to overload your defense, but that they have to be much more active in their defense, so you can overload theirs at the same time with a lot less thought on your end a lot of times. If you want to grab the shield, we'll just pretend he's here. Yeah, I'm a punch shield fighter. We'll get into that in a little bit after I get through this, but I think strap shield is going to be more generally useful.
So, like we were saying earlier, the main thing to keep in mind about strap shield defense is not moving the shield itself too much, but moving your body in a way that it stays protected by the shield and blocks the shot. So, hard to kind of simulate with a punch shield prior to that. So, like, you might want to bend your knees just a bit more. Yeah, get down. Like, put as much of your torso and shoulders and hips and things behind the shield as possible. So, like, if I could see it, I could probably hit it. So, like, there's just a piece that I could see over the top of that shield right now. So that was kind of hard. Sorry. So you're ready to keep your knees bent, roll your shoulder back, but you see the shield's not really moving, just the body is, which is going to look really exaggerated because I'm big. So you know what I mean by rolling your shoulder out of it? So if I'm going to come in like this, now you've got some coverage here too. Your sword's over there, ready to actively strike me to death. So if I really commit to this and lean forward, like one of my feet leaves the ground, stuff like that, I'm taking the step into that shot. It's really easy to just kind of roll back your shoulder, block it. Yeah. So that's what you got to keep in mind. Just don't move the shield, move your body instead. Keep your knees bent low, like lower than probably you would with single sword. Like I bend my knees single sword, but if I'm fighting sword and board, they're much lower. Or strap shield anyway, they're much lower. So you're moving your body, not your shield. That's the most important thing.
Okay. So yeah, and kind of the general concepts of overloading shield defense are going to be in play here. If you get the opportunity to look at I taught a single short sword class. It's in the RW digital classroom that covers killing sword and shield fighters with a single short sword. All the same principles apply. The difficulty with the strap shield is that you are limiting your shot selection somewhat without a lot of active thought on how to move your shield out of the way. But that's going to be kind of important. So
you got to be ready to move around your opponent.
I'm going to grab my punch shield here real fast. This is my personal one. Now, punch shields are very, very different. I mean, obviously, this is with this being my personal shield, a lot of the design characteristics about a strap shield are going to go out the window here. This is not about passive block anymore. The idea that I have with a shield like this is that instead of allowing the shield to sit there and cover an area, and I know that won't get hit, and move the body, not the shield, this is all about move the shield as much as you want, as fast as you can.
Well, yeah, move the shield. You have to move the shield.
Yeah.
I won't say it's move the shield all you want, but you're going to have to do it.
And that's part of the design is that I have a small one because I can't stop myself from moving it a whole lot.
That's fair.
So the idea with this though is that my attacks are completely uninhibited by anything. I'm never going to hit a point where my shield is in the way of my attack, because what I'm wanting to do is to move my defense in such a way that I can move around my attack. So if I'm wanting to swing at Jake's elbow over here or armpit over here, his top right quadrant, sword side quadrant, and he's going to want to swing back at my elbow, what I'm going to do is I was being with like a cross on the other side.
I see okay, gotcha.
So what I'm going to do is bring the shield in such a way that I can still throw follow-up shots, I can still do the offense that I want to run, while my shield moves around my offense so that I'm not getting hit.
Make it count, though.
Make it count, because if you're wrong, you're dead.
Yep.
With a strap shield, though, it's very much about sit back, understand the fact that your opponent swinging at different spots on you won't do anything, so your opponent has to figure out how to hit you, while you just kind of have to figure out how to avoid getting hit on the spots that are still there. Whereas with a punch shield, especially a small punch shield, it's a lot more active. So if I'm swinging on Jake, he's going to be moving his shield towards me and out a little bit so that he's cutting off that angle. Because no matter how deeply I wrap, he can get his shield in front of it without too much difficulty just by moving it. I have ADHD pretty bad, so the goal of everything that I do is to block a shot dead center on my shield. This is why this shield works for me, is because I want to put my shield directly in the middle of every attack that comes at me. So if I have a big shield and I have this desire, then it's a lot slower to move.
Yeah.
And once you block in the center, your shield's real far away.
But even this shield, like you can notice, like here, just hold this for a noticeable difference.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
long that's going to last.
Yeah, so this is going to get me killed very quickly fighting the type of or fighting the style that I want to fight. So what I'm going to want to do is to essentially use the same offense as I would use with a single short sword, and accept the fact that the shield is going to kind of rotate around me, and it's either going to keep me alive or it's not. For super beginner stuff,
we're
that's
not
essentially
trying to
good.
get too much nuance and too deep into the weeds here.
Yeah, so Punch Shield is much more active. For me, it's much more entertaining, but it definitely has its weaknesses, and opponents that know its weaknesses are going to exploit its weaknesses. When I come across an opponent with a shield like mine, a lot of times I'm going to aim for their elbows, because I know that's a very vulnerable spot on me. You kind of come across this one, you swing over there, and the shield's not big enough to passively block it, and that person tends to sit there and look at you while they drop the shield behind them.
So the goal behind this type of punch shield, one that's bigger and heavier than Tim's very small punch shield there. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure this is a medium. Again, didn't make it, but it looks like a medium shield to me. So the goal when I fight with a shield like this is you'll see. Well, first of all, I'm set up like this. My elbow's at about a 45-degree angle here. My thumb's up, just like I'm holding the sword. So I've got this in about this position, away from my body, probably by about 10 inches or so. If I'm going to start fighting Bighead, I'm going to come into the fight like this, and I'm going to start moving my shield in such a way that wherever his sword's going to come from, it's going to be cut off by the edge of my shield. I'm trying to do kind of the opposite. Tim's trying to block everything with the middle of his shield. I'm trying to block everything with the edge of my shield. So my goal is to push his equipment up and out in such a way that I just kind of have free reign of whatever I want to do down here. So, another way to look at it is if I'm coming in from this side, if we're in a ditch and I'm doing this, and I'm coming in from this direction, I'm going to probably do something like this. And that gives me a lot of real estate to kind of do things here. So basically this is to cut off any kind of attack lane that they would have to you. So you're starting to fight face to face. Most people are going to be set up like this with their sword kind of above and behind their head just a bit. So my idea is to push up into that lane of attack, because no matter which lane you're coming to, you're going to have to pass this spot with your hand. And if you have to go past my shield with your hand, you're going to have a much harder time hitting me than I'm going to have hitting you. So that's the goal behind a bigger punch shield. Instead of looking at it as I want to catch every shield in the center, or catch every block in the center of the shield, I should say. I mean, sometimes you can do that, but you're going to have a lot more success just kind of edging your opponent with the rim of your shield.
All right. So yeah, I think that's about got it covered. Again, kind of cycling back to the beginning. If you aren't familiar with a shield, thing number one is try out a couple of different shields, and if at all possible, if you're at a small park, there's only one person that's got a shield, and you don't know whether you like anything outside of that, it's going to be kind of difficult. But if at all possible, go to an event, try out a couple of different types of shields, move around with it, spar a little bit, throw a couple shots with it, and find one that ideally is comfortable to you, but less ideally just doesn't irritate you to fight with. Because
it's all about what feels right and comfortable to you.
Yeah.
If it doesn't feel comfortable, you're going to have a lot harder time forcing it. Whereas something that just feels more natural, lean into that. Go with it.
Yep. So that's about it. We kind of covered the basics on equipment of a couple different sorts. So I'm gonna get these uploaded, and we'll go from there.